My wife never let me visit her family's farm, said it wasn't safe for someone with my bad leg. After she died, I went there anyway, and lost my breath at what I found hidden in plain sight. From a grieving widower locked out of his own property, to a soldier who discovered his family had been waging war against him for 12 years. This story has more twists than a Delta Force extraction gone wrong. And if you've ever wondered what secrets your own family might be keeping, hit subscribe so you don't miss how I uncovered the truth that nearly got me killed. Drop a comment with what state you're in. I'm curious how many veterans are listening to this. My name is Isaac Robertson, and my wife Margaret spent our entire 8-year marriage keeping me away from 340 acres of farmland that I legally owned. Every time I suggested visiting the property in Riverside County, she'd panic. Not just worry, actual panic attacks, hyperventilating, begging me to promise I'd never go there without her permission. She said the terrain was too dangerous for my war-damaged leg, that I might fall and hurt myself. But I'd walk patrol in Afghanistan with fresh shrapnel wounds. What could be more dangerous than Kandahar? Margaret died 3 weeks ago. Cancer took her fast, and her kids Derek and Samantha didn't even show up for the funeral, just sent expensive flowers and asked the lawyer about their mother's farm. Their mother's farm, bought with my disability settlement, titled in my name, but somehow it belonged to them. The lawyer handed me the deed on Tuesday morning, and for the first time in 12 years, I had the keys to my own property. But what I discovered when I finally drove out there made me understand why Margaret had been so desperate to keep me away. The lawyer handed me the deed on a Tuesday morning. 340 acres on Canyon Road, purchased March 15th, 2013, with my disability settlement money. Margaret had insisted on putting both our names on it, said her kids Derek and Samantha needed somewhere to find themselves after their troubles. I'd agreed because I loved her, and because soldiers protect their family's family, but Margaret never let me visit. Not once in 12 years of marriage. She'd go out there every few weeks, come back nervous and jumpy, wouldn't talk about what she'd seen. The few times I pressed, she'd say the terrain was too rough for my leg, that I might fall and hurt myself worse. But I'd walked patrol in Kandahar with worse terrain and a fresh shrapnel wound. What could be so dangerous about a farm in California? Now Margaret was gone. Cancer took her in 3 weeks flat, and Derek hadn't even called during the funeral. Neither had Samantha. They'd sent flowers, expensive ones, but couldn't be bothered to show up for the woman who'd raised them after their father ran off. The lawyer mentioned they'd been asking about the property, wanting to know about the will, about whether I had any legal claim to their mother's farm. Their mother's farm, bought with my blood money, titled in my name, but somehow it was theirs. Margaret's nervousness suddenly made a different kind of sense. She wasn't protecting me from the farm, but what Margaret feared wasn't me getting hurt. I met Margaret in 2012 at a veteran support group. She was volunteering, bringing coffee and those little cookies that taste like cardboard, but somehow make everything better when someone cares enough to bring them. Her first husband had been Army too, died in a car accident when Derek was 14 and Samantha was 11. She understood the nightmares, the way loud noises could send me diving for cover behind the couch. She never made me feel broken. We married fast, maybe too fast, but when you've seen enough death, you learn not to waste time on doubt. Her kids were polite enough at the wedding, Derek, 29 and fresh out of county jail for drug possession, Samantha, 26, and calling herself a social media entrepreneur, which seemed to mean taking pictures of her breakfast. They smiled when they had to, hugged me when Margaret was watching, but I felt the coldness underneath. I was the replacement father they never asked for, the stranger spending their inheritance. Margaret had inherited some money when her mother died, about $600,000, and she wanted to buy land. Said it would be good for the kids to have roots, somewhere they could build something real instead of just drifting. I added my disability settlement to make the purchase possible, $280,000 from the Army's way of saying sorry about the IED that shattered my left leg and ended my career. We bought the farm together, 340 acres of rolling hills an hour outside Los Angeles. Perfect place for a fresh start. But something changed after we bought it. Margaret started making excuses why I couldn't visit. First, it was the road being washed out, then construction on the main house, then Derek having personal issues that required privacy. Every few weeks, she'd drive out there alone, stay overnight, come back quiet and distracted. When I asked what the kids were doing with all that land, she'd give vague answers about finding their direction and learning responsibility. The phone calls started about 6 months after we bought the place. Derek would call late at night, his voice tight and angry, demanding to speak to his mother privately. She'd take the phone into the bedroom, close the door, talk in whispers for 20 or 30 minutes. Sometimes she'd come out crying, but when I asked what was wrong, she'd just say Derek was going through a hard time, that he needed space to figure things out. Samantha's calls were different, usually during the day, but they had the same effect. Margaret would get nervous and distracted for hours afterward. The anxiety attacks started in 2019. Margaret would wake up in the middle of the night, sweating and gasping, talking about something being wrong at the farm. When I suggested we drive out there together, check on things, she'd panic. Actually panic, hyperventilating and begging me to promise I'd never go out there without her permission. She made me swear on my military oath that I'd respect her wishes about the farm, that I'd trust her judgment about what was safe for me. I kept that promise right up until the day she died. The cancer moved fast, gave us no time to say the things we should have said. In those final weeks, she kept trying to tell me something about the farm, about Derek and Samantha. But the morphine made her words slur together. She'd grip my hand and whisper about keeping me safe, about secrets that would hurt me, about decisions she'd made to protect us both. I thought it was the drugs talking. Her last conscious words were, "Don't let them know you're coming." I assumed she meant the kids, that they'd want time to grieve privately before dealing with practical matters. But Margaret's last request wasn't about grief. What she was really saying wasn't about protecting them from me. I drove out to the farm 3 days after the funeral. The GPS led me down Canyon Road, past mailboxes spaced miles apart, until I reached 1247. The gate was new, heavy steel with an electronic lock, and cameras mounted on both sides. Security cameras on a farm in the middle of nowhere. 2 expensive trucks sat in the driveway, a black Ford F-350 that probably cost $60,000, and a white Range Rover with custom rims. Derek's transportation had definitely improved since his county jail days. I parked outside the gate and called Derek's number. He answered on the first ring like he'd been expecting me. "Isaac, what are you doing here?" "Visiting the farm. Thought it was time I finally saw what my money bought." Long silence. Then, "This isn't a good time, man. We're dealing with Mom's stuff, trying to process everything. Maybe give us a few weeks?" "Derek, I own half this property. I don't need permission to visit my own land." Another pause, longer this time. I could hear voices in the background, Samantha saying something urgent I couldn't make out. "Look, Isaac, you don't understand the situation here. The farm, it's not safe right now. There's been some equipment problems, structural issues with the buildings. You could get hurt with your leg." Same excuse Margaret had been giving me for 12 years. But Derek's voice had an edge his mother's never did. A threat wrapped in fake concern. "What kind of structural issues?" "Just trust me, okay? Mom always said the terrain was too rough for you. Why don't you head home? We'll call you when things are safer." That's when I noticed the smell. Even through my truck's closed windows, even with the afternoon wind blowing the wrong direction, I could smell it. Sweet and skunky and unmistakable. I'd smelled it plenty of times during raids in Afghanistan, usually right before we found someone's private stash. Marijuana. A lot of it. "Derek, I'm not leaving. Either you open this gate, or I'm calling the sheriff to escort me onto my own property." "Don't do that, Isaac. Seriously, you don't want to involve cops in family business." Family business. 20 minutes later, Derek appeared at the gate, looking nothing like the skinny kid I'd met at the wedding. He'd put on muscle, the kind you get from manual labor or prison workouts, and his eyes were harder than I remembered. He walked with the swagger of someone used to being the biggest threat in the room. Isaac, you need to understand something. Just because your name is on some paperwork doesn't mean this is your place. Mom bought this land for us, her real family. You were just helping with the financing. The deed says Isaac Robertson, Derek. My name, my money, my property. Yeah, well, things change. Mom's gone now, and we've been taking care of this place for 12 years while you sat home collecting disability checks. You think you can just roll up here and start making demands? That's when Samantha came walking down the driveway, and I understood where Derek's newfound confidence was coming from. She wasn't the awkward young woman from the wedding anymore. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, the kind of tan you get from spa vacations instead of farm work. Her Instagram entrepreneurship was apparently paying better than I'd imagined. Isaac, she said, her voice honey-sweet and venomous. How lovely to see you, though I wish you'd called first. We're in the middle of some very delicate work here. What kind of work requires this much security? The kind that's none of your business, Derek snapped. You need to leave, now. I looked past them toward the farm buildings visible through the trees. 6 large greenhouse structures that hadn't been there in the planning photos Margaret had shown me years ago. New electrical lines running from a transformer that could power a small town. And that smell, getting stronger as the wind shifted. Derek called it trespassing when I suggested walking my own property line. But I knew what I was dealing with now. Derek and Samantha hadn't been finding themselves on my farm. They'd been building an empire. I drove to the county courthouse the next morning. Public records are public for a reason, and 12 years of Army intelligence training doesn't just disappear because you're dealing with family instead of insurgents. The property assessor's office had everything I needed: building permits, electrical upgrades, even satellite photos updated annually for tax purposes. The images told a story Margaret never had. In 2013, right after we bought the farm, there were just 2 original structures: a farmhouse and an old barn. By 2015, 3 large greenhouse structures appeared. By 2018, 6. Each one roughly 40 feet by 100 feet, with electrical capacity that would make a small manufacturing plant jealous. The permit applications listed them as agricultural growing facilities for organic vegetables. But the electrical usage reports told a different story. The farm was pulling enough power for a small neighborhood, consistent with high-intensity grow lights running 18 hours a day. The kind of setup needed for year-round cultivation of plants that prefer controlled environments. Plants like marijuana. I called Jake Morrison, a lawyer I'd met through the Veterans Support Group. Jake specialized in property disputes and had dealt with his share of family complications after his own service in Iraq. Isaac, you're describing a commercial marijuana operation on property you legally own. Even if it's state legal, there are federal implications you need to understand. What kind of implications? Asset forfeiture. If they're running an illegal operation on your land, even without your knowledge, the feds can seize the entire property under RICO statutes. You could lose everything. That afternoon, I parked half a mile from the farm and walked the property line with a pair of binoculars. The tree coverage was good, and my leg held up better than it had in years. Apparently, rage is excellent physical therapy. From the eastern ridge, I had a clear view of the entire operation. The greenhouses were running at full capacity. Through the translucent walls, I could see rows of plants, maybe 8 feet tall, definitely not vegetables. Workers moved between the buildings with the efficiency of people who'd been doing this for years. I counted at least 6 people, maybe more, all young, all moving with purpose. This wasn't some amateur hobby operation. This was business. I started taking photos with my phone, documenting everything I could see. License plates on the vehicles, faces of the workers, the electrical setup, the security cameras, even the industrial-grade ventilation systems venting from each greenhouse. Every piece of evidence I'd need to prove what Derek and Samantha had built with my money. That's when my phone rang. Derek. Isaac, I'm going to ask you one more time to stay away from the farm. You're not understanding how serious this situation is. Oh, I understand perfectly, Derek. I understand you've been running a marijuana operation on my property for at least 7 years. I understand why Margaret was afraid to let me visit. And I understand why you and Samantha could afford designer trucks and jewelry on minimum wage jobs. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, you don't know what you're messing with here. Actually, I do. I'm messing with federal drug trafficking charges on property that's titled in my name. Do you have any idea what that means for me legally? It means you should have minded your own business. Derek, this is my business. Literally. This is my land, purchased with my money, and you've turned it into a liability that could destroy my life. Did you think I'd never find out? Did you think I'd just let you steal everything Margaret and I built? Another long pause. Mom protected you from this for 12 years. She begged us to keep you out of it. Said you'd ruin everything with your military justice bullshit. But Mom's not here anymore, and we've got too much invested to just walk away, because you're having a conscience crisis. What's that supposed to mean? It means accidents happen, Isaac, especially to people who don't know when to back down. Mom learned that lesson. The line went dead. I sat there for a full minute, processing what Derek had just said. Mom learned that lesson. Margaret's anxiety attacks, her panic about me visiting the farm, her last words about keeping me safe. She hadn't been protecting Derek and Samantha from me. She'd been protecting me from them. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Stop digging or you'll find more than you're looking for. I realized why Margaret never wanted me to come to the farm. She was afraid of what I'd do when I found out, because she knew me well enough to know I wouldn't just walk away from this. But as I looked through my binoculars at the operation my own money had funded, I realized something Derek and Samantha didn't understand about their stepfather. I wasn't just a disabled veteran they could intimidate. I was a soldier who'd been trained to dismantle operations exactly like this. And now I knew what Margaret had really been afraid of. Not that they'd hurt me, but that I'd hurt them when I found out what they'd done. What I was looking at wasn't just a marijuana farm, it was a target. I spent the next 2 weeks conducting surveillance like I was back in Afghanistan. Every morning at dawn, I'd position myself at different observation points around the property perimeter. I documented shift changes, delivery schedules, security routines, everything. The operation was more sophisticated than I'd initially thought. They had a rotating crew of at least 12 workers, all young, all paid in cash based on what I observed through binoculars. Deliveries came twice a week, supplies going in, product going out, always in unmarked vans with rotating license plates. The security system included motion detectors along the main driveway, but they'd never bothered to secure the eastern ridge where I'd been watching from. Jake Morrison helped me file the paperwork to get official property surveys and tax records going back to 2013. What we discovered was a shell game of LLCs and business registrations that would have impressed a money laundering specialist. Derek and Samantha had established 8 different companies since 2014: Riverside Agricultural Solutions, Canyon Valley Organic Farms, Desert Sun Cultivation, and 5 others. Each one listed the farm as their business address, each one filing just enough paperwork to look legitimate. Isaac, this is a multi-million-dollar operation, Jake said, spreading the financial documents across his desk. Based on the electrical usage and square footage, they're probably producing 60 to 80 pounds per harvest, 4 harvests a year. That's 300 pounds annually, and at current market prices, even wholesale, we're looking at over $1 million per year in revenue. How much money have they made on my property? Conservative estimate, $7 to $8 million over 12 years. And that's not counting the expansion they're clearly planning. I found permit applications for 3 additional greenhouse structures submitted last month. I drove out to the farm that afternoon, parked at the gate, and called Derek again. We need to talk, face to face. I told you, Isaac, stay away from here. You're going to get yourself in trouble. Derek, I've got photographs of your operation. I've got financial records showing $1 million revenues from LLCs registered to my address. I've got building permits and electrical usage reports. We can handle this as a family matter, or I can turn everything over to the DEA and let them sort it out. 20 minutes later, Derek and Samantha met me at the gate. Derek looked angry, but Samantha looked scared. Good. Fear makes people make mistakes. What do you want? Derek asked. I want to know why you thought you could steal my property and turn it into your personal money machine. We didn't steal anything, Samantha said. Mom gave us permission to use the land. She knew what we were doing. Margaret knew? Of course she knew, Derek snapped. Where do you think the money for her cancer treatments came from? Insurance doesn't cover everything, and experimental treatments are expensive as hell. We paid for her medical bills with profits from the farm. That hit me like a sniper's bullet. Margaret's treatments had cost over $200,000. I'd assumed her savings and life insurance were covering it. I'd never asked where the money was coming from because I was too focused on just keeping her alive. Mom was terrified you'd find out, Samantha continued. She said you'd see it as drug dealing, that you wouldn't understand we were just trying to take care of our family. Take care of your family? Samantha, you're wearing a watch that costs more than most people make in 6 months. Derek's driving a $60,000 truck. This isn't about taking care of anyone. This is about greed. You don't understand, Derek said, his voice rising. Mom was dying and we needed money for her treatments. Yeah, we made some profit, but we also saved her life for an extra 2 years. What would you have done? Let her die? I would have found a legal way to pay for her treatments. I would have sold my house, taken out loans, done whatever it took without turning my property into a federal crime scene. Your property, Derek laughed. Man, you really don't get it, do you? Mom bought this place for us. You just helped with the down payment. She always planned for it to be ours after she was gone. Where's the will that says that? Derek and Samantha exchanged a look. Mom's will is complicated. There are some issues with the probate process. What kind of issues? Legal issues, Samantha said quickly. Nothing you need to worry about. The point is, we've been running this operation for 12 years. We've built something here. We're not just going to shut it down because you're having moral objections. Yes, you are, because if you don't, I'm calling the FBI tomorrow morning and turning over every piece of evidence I've collected. And trust me, I've collected plenty. Derek stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the marijuana on his clothes, see the calculation in his eyes. Isaac, you need to be very careful here. There's a lot of money involved, and people have invested a lot in keeping this operation running. If you disrupt that, well, people protect their investments. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice, from one family member to another. I looked at these two people who'd been calling me family for 12 years while they systematically stole everything Margaret and I had built. Derek with his prison muscles and criminal confidence, Samantha with her designer lifestyle built on drug money. They weren't family. They were thieves with better marketing. Here's my counteroffer, I said. You have 48 hours to begin shutting down this operation. 48 hours to start moving your plants and equipment off my property. If you don't, I'm not calling the FBI. I'm walking onto my own land and documenting everything myself, and then I'm calling the FBI. You can't just walk onto an active grow operation, Samantha protested. There are safety issues, legal complications. Actually, I can. It's called property ownership. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, but didn't hit send yet. Or I can call the sheriff's department right now and have them escort me onto my own property to inspect it for illegal activity. Derek grabbed my wrist. Don't do that. Seriously, you're going to regret it if you do that. I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then back up at his face. Derek, you've got 3 seconds to let go of me before this goes from a family discussion to assault charges. He let go, but the message was clear. They weren't planning to shut down voluntarily, which meant I needed to accelerate my timeline. That night, I called Agent Patricia Coleman at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Agent Coleman, my name is Isaac Robertson, and I need to report a large-scale marijuana operation being conducted on property I legally own without my knowledge or consent. Mr. Robertson, how large an operation are we talking about? Conservative estimate? $8 million in revenue over 12 years, sophisticated infrastructure, organized distribution network. And I believe the operators may be planning to eliminate me to protect their investment. Sir, I'm going to need you to come in tomorrow morning. And Mr. Robertson, don't go back to that property alone. But Derek had already made one crucial mistake. He'd threatened me on a phone call I'd been recording since day one of my investigation. In the Army, we called it actionable intelligence. In civilian life, it was called evidence of conspiracy. Either way, Derek and Samantha had just handed me the ammunition I needed to take back my farm. I met Agent Coleman at the FBI field office in Los Angeles the next morning. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of focused attention that comes from investigating financial crimes for a living. She reviewed my photographs, financial documents, and recordings with the efficiency of someone who'd seen this pattern before. Mr. Robertson, you've documented a sophisticated marijuana cultivation and distribution operation. Even with state legalization, operations of this scale require federal oversight and taxation. Based on what you've shown me, they're evading both. What are my legal options? Honestly, your biggest risk right now is federal asset forfeiture. Even though you weren't aware of the operation, the property could be seized as proceeds of criminal activity. However, your cooperation and evidence collection puts you in a much better position. She handed me a thick folder. These are your options. You can file a civil suit to reclaim your property, but that takes months, and there's no guarantee the operation won't continue during litigation. Or you can help us build a federal case. Organized drug trafficking, money laundering, tax evasion. With the evidence you've collected and your cooperation, we can shut them down permanently and protect your property rights. What would that involve? Controlled surveillance, possible wire recordings, coordinated raid to seize assets and arrest the operators. It's more dangerous, but it's also permanent. I thought about Margaret's anxiety attacks, her desperate attempts to keep me away from the farm, her last words about keeping me safe. She'd been caught between protecting me and protecting her kids, and it had destroyed her peace of mind for years. Agent Coleman, these people have been stealing from me for 12 years while I thought I was supporting family. They threatened me when I discovered their operation, and they turned my wife into an anxious wreck because she was terrified of what would happen if I found out. So you want to proceed with federal prosecution? I want to proceed with justice. That afternoon, I drove back to the farm with a purpose that felt familiar. In Afghanistan, the moment you decided to engage a target, everything became clearer. No more reconnaissance, no more planning, just execution. I called Derek from the gate. Isaac, I thought we agreed you'd stay away while we figured things out. Derek, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about Margaret's medical bills, about family loyalty, about doing whatever it takes to take care of people you love. Yeah? And I realize I may have been too hasty. Maybe we can work something out. Silence on the other end. I could almost hear him calculating, trying to figure out what angle I was working. What kind of something? I'd like to see the operation. Understand what Margaret was protecting, what you and Samantha have built. Maybe there's a way for everyone to benefit. Isaac, I don't think that's a good idea. Like I said, there are safety issues. Derek, I'm not going anywhere until I see my property. I'm sitting at the gate right now, and I'm not leaving until I understand what my money has been funding for 12 years. Another pause. Then, hold on. 5 minutes later, Derek appeared at the gate with 2 other men I didn't recognize. Bigger men with the kind of casual threat posture that suggested they weren't just farmhands. Isaac, these are my business partners. They have some concerns about operational security. I'm not interested in your business partners, Derek. I'm interested in seeing my farm. The thing is, Isaac, once you see certain things, you become part of them. You understand? There's no going back to pretending you don't know what's happening here. I stopped pretending the moment I smelled marijuana through my truck windows. Derek opened the gate. All right, but understand, you're crossing a line here. Once you're inside, you're either with us or you're a problem, and we solve our problems permanently. I followed Derek's truck up the long driveway, noting every detail for the report I'd filed with Agent Coleman. The operation was even more impressive up close. 6 greenhouse structures, each one climate-controlled and running at full capacity. Industrial electrical systems, sophisticated irrigation, security cameras covering every angle. This wasn't just marijuana cultivation, this was agricultural engineering. Inside the first greenhouse, Derek walked me through rows of plants that were clearly worth millions of dollars. Each plant yields about 2 pounds every 4 months, he explained, his pride overcoming his caution. We run 4 cycles per year, coordinated harvesting, everything organic and high grade. Our wholesale price is $4,000 per pound. Retail customers pay double. How many customers? Let's just say we supply most of the dispensaries between Los Angeles and San Diego, plus some private clients who prefer discretion. Samantha joined us at the second greenhouse, her nervousness from yesterday replaced by something that looked like excitement. Isaac, you should see our processing facility. We've got industrial drying rooms, packaging equipment, even a lab for quality testing. This is impressive, I said, and meant it. How long have you been running at this capacity? Full capacity for about 8 years, Derek said. We started small, just a couple plants in the old barn, but as we learned the business, we expanded. Mom was worried at first, but when she saw how much money we were making, how we could afford her treatments, she started to understand. Margaret knew about all this? Of course she knew, Samantha said. She was terrified you'd find out, though. She said you'd see it as criminal instead of entrepreneurial. Why was she so afraid of my reaction? Derek and Samantha exchanged another one of their looks. Isaac, Mom knew you'd try to shut us down. She said you had this black and white view of right and wrong, that you wouldn't understand the gray areas of business. And she was afraid of what you'd do if I tried to stop you. What do you mean? Samantha asked. I mean, she was afraid you'd hurt me to protect your operation. Derek laughed, but it didn't sound amused. Isaac, we're not violent people. We're business people. But business is business. You threaten someone's livelihood, they're going to defend it. Is that what happened to Margaret? She threatened your business? The laughter stopped. What's that supposed to mean? Margaret died of cancer, Derek. Fast-moving, aggressive cancer that appeared right around the time you expanded to full capacity. Were you using pesticides? Industrial chemicals? Something that might have made her sick? That's ridiculous, Samantha said quickly. Mom's cancer was genetic. Bad luck. But Derek's expression had changed. Isaac, you need to stop asking questions you don't want answers to. Actually, Derek, I want answers to all my questions, starting with how much money you've made on my property, how much tax you've paid on that income, and what really happened to Margaret. Derek stepped closer. You want to know what happened to Mom? She spent 12 years trying to protect you from learning the truth about this family. She died trying to keep you safe from consequences you're too stupid to understand. What consequences? The consequence of interfering with our business. The consequence of threatening our income. The consequence of not knowing when to walk away. That's when I realized Derek wasn't just talking about Margaret's fear anymore. He was talking about his own plans. Are you threatening me, Derek? I'm educating you about reality. This operation generates $15 million a year. We employ people, we pay expenses, we have investors who expect returns. You think we're just going to shut it down because you're having moral complications? I think you're going to shut it down because it's illegal and it's happening on my property. Derek smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. Isaac, you've seen too much now. You know too much about our business, our customers, our processes. You're either going to become a partner in this operation or what? Or accidents happen, even to careful people, even to veterans with good instincts. Samantha looked nervous again. Derek, don't what, Sam? He's already made his choice. He could have walked away, could have pretended he never saw any of this, but he had to push. He had to investigate, just like Mom was always afraid he would. I looked around the greenhouse, at the millions of dollars worth of marijuana, growing with my property taxes, maintained with my utilities, protected by my land ownership. These people had stolen 12 years of my life and made Margaret complicit in her own anxiety and fear. You know what your mistake was, Derek? What's that? You assumed I'd be afraid of you. I pulled out my phone and checked the recording app. 43 minutes of conversation, all clearly captured. But you forgot something important about soldiers. We're trained to gather intelligence before we strike. Derek's face went white. You've been recording us? Every word. And this isn't the first recording I've made. Agent Patricia Coleman at the FBI Financial Crimes Division has been very interested in everything you've told me. That's when Derek lunged for my phone, and that's when Samantha started screaming. But it was too late. The evidence was already uploaded to cloud storage, already copied to federal servers, already enough to destroy everything they'd built on my stolen property. Derek had made one final mistake. He'd assumed family meant I wouldn't fight back. But Derek and Samantha weren't family. They were criminals who'd been stealing my life one day at a time for 12 years, and now their time was up. Derek didn't get my phone. 12 years of physical therapy and adaptive training meant my reflexes weren't what they used to be, but my tactical awareness was still sharp. I saw his move coming and stepped back, putting a row of marijuana plants between us. Derek, assaulting a federal witness is a felony. You really want to add that to your drug trafficking charges? You son of a bitch, he snarled, pulling out his own phone. You have no idea what you've just done. And he started making calls, rapid-fire conversations in code language that would have been obvious to anyone with intelligence training. We've got a problem. Yeah, he knows everything, but... No, we can't wait. Tonight. Samantha was crying now, the reality of federal prosecution finally sinking in. Derek, maybe we should just shut down, take what we can, and disappear. This is getting too dangerous. We're not shutting down anything, Sam. We've got 12 years and $15 million invested in this operation. We've got people depending on us, investors who don't accept excuses. We solve the problem, not run from it. What are you talking about? Derek looked directly at me. Isaac's going to have an accident. Tragic, really. War veteran with a bad leg, wandering around unfamiliar terrain in the dark, takes a fall, hits his head. These things happen to old soldiers. The casual way he discussed murdering me was almost impressive. No emotion, no hesitation, just business planning. But there was something else in his voice, something I recognized from interrogating captured insurgents in Afghanistan. Derek wasn't just protecting his operation anymore. He was protecting himself from something bigger. Derek, who are your investors? His face went carefully blank. That's not your concern. It is if they're the reason you can't just shut down and walk away. This isn't just about your marijuana farm anymore, is it? You're into something deeper. Samantha looked confused. Derek, what's he talking about? Our investors are just local business people who wanted to diversify into agriculture. Derek shot her a warning look, but it was too late. I'd seen that dynamic before in Afghanistan. Junior members of a cell who didn't understand the full scope of their organization's activities. Sam, how much do you actually know about where your startup money came from? Who provided the capital for this operation? Local investors, like Derek said. People who saw the potential in legal marijuana cultivation. Legal marijuana cultivation doesn't require shell companies and cash transactions. It doesn't require threatening stepfathers or hiding operations from property owners. Sam, you're not running a legal business. You're running a money laundering operation for people who can't make legitimate investments. Derek's hand moved toward his jacket, and I realized the conversation was about to shift from threats to action. In Afghanistan, that moment of decision was usually when everything went kinetic. The difference was, in Afghanistan, I'd had backup and body armor. Here, I just had 12 years of preparation and a recording device. Derek, before you do something that gets you life in federal prison, you should know Agent Coleman has been monitoring my location since I arrived here. If I don't check in every 30 minutes, she's sending federal agents to investigate. You're bluffing. I held up my phone, showing the timer app counting down. 23 minutes until my next scheduled check-in. Try me. That's when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Agent Coleman. Mr. Robertson, are you all right? Your location tracker showed you'd been stationary for over an hour. I put the call on speaker. Agent Coleman, I'm fine. I'm currently in the main greenhouse with Derek and Samantha, documenting the operation we discussed. Sir, I strongly advised against direct contact without backup. I know, but they've been very educational. Derek just explained their investor structure, their revenue projections, and their contingency plans for dealing with interference. And Derek was staring at the phone like it was a live grenade. Mr. Robertson, please stay on the line while I dispatch units to your location. Actually, Agent Coleman, Derek was just about to show me their processing facility. weren't you, Derek?" Derek's calculation was written across his face. He could try to silence me, but that would mean assaulting a federal witness while an FBI agent was listening. Or he could try to minimize the damage and hope 12 years of criminal activity wouldn't destroy the rest of his life. "Isaac," Samantha whispered, "please don't do this to us. We're family." "Family doesn't steal from each other for 12 years, Sam. Family doesn't threaten murder when they get caught. Family doesn't turn a mother into an anxious wreck because she's terrified of what her children might do to her husband. We never hurt Mom. You made her choose between protecting me and protecting you. You made her complicit in stealing from the man she loved. You destroyed her peace of mind for years because she knew what you were doing was wrong, but she was too afraid to stop it." Derek was backing toward the greenhouse exit, probably calculating escape routes. "Agent Coleman, Derek appears to be leaving. Should I follow him?" "Absolutely not, Mr. Robertson. Stay exactly where you are." But Derek stopped at the exit. "Isaac, you think this ends with federal agents arresting me and Sam? You think this ends with you getting your farm back and living happily ever after? I think this ends with justice. You have no idea who you're messing with. The people we work for, the money we handle, the connections we've built over 12 years, this goes way beyond what you understand. You shut us down. You're not just affecting us. You're affecting people who don't forgive interference." "Who are you really working for, Derek?" He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. Real fear, the kind that comes from knowing you're trapped between federal prosecution and something worse. "You know what, Isaac? You want to know the truth? You want to understand what Mom was really protecting you from? Fine. But when this all comes out, when you see what we've really been involved in, remember that you asked for it." Derek pulled out his phone and made one more call. "Yeah, it's me. We've got federal attention, full exposure, time to cut losses and activate contingencies." He listened for a moment, then looked directly at me. "They said to tell you that Margaret wasn't the only family member who might have accidents." The line went dead, but I could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. Federal backup was coming, and Derek knew his time was up. But as he disappeared into the darkness beyond the greenhouse, I realized this wasn't ending with arrests and asset forfeiture. This was just the beginning of understanding what Margaret had really been afraid of, and why she'd been so desperate to keep me away from the farm that she'd sacrificed her own peace of mind for 12 years. Derek's final threat wasn't just about the marijuana operation. There was something bigger here, something that explained the sophisticated infrastructure, the million-dollar revenues, and the kind of investors who don't accept failure. Margaret hadn't just been protecting me from learning about a family drug business. She'd been protecting me from discovering that Derek and Samantha were involved in something that could get us all killed. The FBI raid happened at dawn, but I was already awake, sitting in Agent Coleman's field office going through surveillance photos and financial records. Derek's threat about investors who don't forgive interference had shifted the entire investigation. What I'd thought was a family drug operation turned out to be something much more sophisticated. "Mr. Robertson, we've been tracking suspicious financial activity connected to your property for 8 months, Agent Coleman explained. Large cash deposits, international wire transfers, patterns consistent with money laundering operations. Your stepchildren weren't just growing marijuana. They were washing money for a criminal organization." "What kind of organization?" "The kind that uses legitimate-looking agricultural businesses to clean proceeds from human trafficking, weapon sales, and international drug distribution. Based on the financial patterns we've identified, at least $40 million has moved through accounts connected to your property over the past 5 years." I stared at the surveillance photos spread across her desk. Derek and Samantha meeting with men in expensive suits. Samantha making deposits at different banks across 3 counties. Derek loading unmarked vehicles with packages that definitely weren't vegetables. My property hadn't just been supporting a marijuana farm, it had been the center of a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. "Agent Coleman, how long have you been investigating this?" We started monitoring Derek Hartwell when he was released from county jail in 2018. His associates, his financial activity, his sudden access to capital that didn't match any legitimate income source. When we traced the money back to your property, we realized the scope was much larger than a single operation. Why didn't you contact me sooner? Because we weren't certain you weren't involved. Large-scale money laundering operations usually require property owner cooperation. Your complete absence from the property for 12 years was either very sophisticated cover or genuine ignorance. I thought about Margaret's anxiety attacks, her desperate attempts to keep me away, her final words about protecting me from something that would hurt me. She hadn't just known about Derek's drug operation. She'd known about the money laundering, the criminal connections, the danger that came with federal investigation. Agent Coleman, I want to help you build a case against them, whatever it takes. Mr. Robertson, that's going to require you to participate in a controlled operation. We need evidence of their current activities, documentation of their financial processes, and if possible, identification of their higher-level contacts. What would that involve? She handed me a small device that looked like a button. Wire transmitter, real-time audio monitoring. We'll have agents positioned around your property during any interaction with Derek or his associates. And if something goes wrong? Federal backup is 30 seconds away at all times. But Miss Stewart, Robertson, I need you to understand the risks. People who launder $40 million don't hesitate to eliminate witnesses. If they suspect you're cooperating with federal investigation, Agent Coleman, these people have been stealing my life for 12 years. They made my wife complicit in criminal activity and destroyed her peace of mind. They threatened to kill me when I discovered their operation. I'm not walking away now. That afternoon, I called Derek from a phone the FBI had provided with recording capability. Derek, we need to talk. I've had time to think about our conversation yesterday, and I believe we can work out an arrangement. Isaac, I thought I was clear about what happens to people who interfere with our business. Derek, I'm not interfering. I'm proposing a partnership. Long pause. What kind of partnership? The kind where I provide legal protection for your operation in exchange for a percentage of the profits. I own the property, I can legitimize your business activities, and I can provide cover from federal investigation. Why would you do that? Because $43,000 a year in disability payments doesn't provide the retirement I was hoping for. Because I'm tired of being on the outside of family decisions. And because I realize Margaret was right. Sometimes you have to be practical about moral complications. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear voices in the background, people discussing my proposal, calculating the advantages of having a legitimate property owner as a partner. Isaac, if we bring you into the business, you need to understand there are people above us in the chain. People who will want to verify your commitment, your reliability. Are you prepared for that? Derek, I spent 12 years in the Army following orders from people above me in the chain. I understand how organizational hierarchy works. All right, come to the farm tonight, 8 o'clock. Come alone. And Isaac, if this is some kind of setup, if you're wearing a wire or working with federal agents, the people I answer to will make sure you disappear permanently. I looked at Agent Coleman, who was monitoring the call. She gave me a thumbs up. Derek, I'll see you at 8. And Derek, I'm looking forward to meeting your business partners. The line went dead. Agent Coleman handed me the wire transmitter and a backup GPS tracker. Mr. Robertson, in 6 hours, we're going to shut down their entire operation and arrest everyone involved. Are you ready for this? I thought about Margaret's anxiety attacks, Derek's threats, 12 years of stolen property and destroyed trust. Agent Coleman, I've been ready for this since the day I discovered what they did to my wife. Tonight, the war came home, but this time I wasn't fighting for strangers in a foreign country. I was fighting for justice, for Margaret's memory, and for the right to reclaim my own life. Derek had made one final mistake. He'd assumed I was just a disabled veteran he could intimidate or eliminate. But Derek had never served overseas, never learned that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. I arrived at the farm at 8 o'clock sharp, wearing the FBI wire and carrying the backup GPS tracker Agent Coleman had insisted on. Derek met me at the gate, but he wasn't alone. 3 men in expensive suits stood beside him, the kind of people who solve problems with money or violence, depending on what's more efficient. Isaac, these are our business partners I mentioned. They wanted to meet you before we discuss any partnership arrangements. The tallest man stepped forward, extending a hand like this was a normal business meeting. Mr. Robertson, I'm Anthony Castellano. Derek tells me you're interested in legitimizing our agricultural operation. I shook his hand, noting the expensive watch, the custom-tailored suit, the way Derek deferred to him completely. This wasn't just a higher-level drug dealer. This was organized crime. Mr. Castellano, I'm interested in understanding the full scope of what's been happening on my property for the past 12 years. Straight to business. I respect that. Castellano smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Derek, show Mr. Robertson our financial records. I think he should understand exactly what kind of partnership we're offering. We walked to the main farmhouse, which had been converted into what looked like a corporate office. Computer workstations, filing cabinets, phones ringing constantly. Samantha was at one of the computers, managing what appeared to be a sophisticated accounting system. Isaac, she said, looking nervous, I'm glad you decided to work with us instead of against us. Castellano gestured to a wall chart showing financial projections. Mr. Robertson, your property generates approximately $15 million annually in agricultural revenue, but that's only part of our operation. The real value is in our financial services business. What kind of financial services? We help international businesses invest in American agriculture, currency exchange, investment facilitation, regulatory compliance. Very profitable, very necessary in today's global economy. Derek handed me a thick folder. Isaac, these are our profit and loss statements for the past 3 years. As you can see, we've been quite successful. I reviewed the documents, noting the sophisticated money laundering operation disguised as agricultural investment. Millions of dollars flowing in from offshore accounts, processed through shell companies, then distributed to legitimate-seeming business operations across California. This is impressive, I said, and meant it. How much of this revenue is generated specifically from marijuana cultivation versus financial services? About 60-40 split, Castellano replied. The marijuana provides cash flow and legitimate business cover. The financial services provide the real profits. And my role would be? Property owner, legitimate face of the operation, legal protection against federal investigation. In exchange, you receive 10% of gross revenues, approximately $4 million annually. $4 million. More money than I'd ever seen in my lifetime, offered in exchange for legitimizing a criminal enterprise that had already stolen 12 years of my life. Mr. Castellano, that's a generous offer, but I have some concerns about federal oversight. Agricultural operations of this scale usually attract IRS attention, EPA inspection, sometimes DEA investigation. That's exactly why we need a legitimate property owner with a clean background. Someone with military service, disability benefits, no criminal record. Someone federal agencies would never suspect of involvement in sophisticated financial operations. Derek was watching my face carefully. Isaac, this is a one-time offer. You're either with us completely, or you're a security risk that needs to be eliminated. I understand the stakes, Derek, but before I commit to a long-term partnership, I need to understand the full scope of the operation. Who are your international investors? What other properties are involved? What happens if federal investigation does occur? Castellano exchanged glances with Derek. Mr. Robertson, some information's only shared with full partners. Are you ready to make that commitment? I looked around the room, at the sophisticated money laundering operation built on my stolen property, at Derek and Samantha, who'd spent 12 years living criminal lifestyles while I thought they were finding themselves, at men in expensive suits who'd built a multi-million-dollar empire using my legitimate ownership as cover. Mr. Castellano, I spent 12 years in the Army following orders without question. I understand organizational loyalty and operational security, but I also understand that partnership requires trust, and trust requires full disclosure. What kind of disclosure? I want to know how Margaret died." The room went completely silent. Derek's face went white. Samantha stopped typing, and Castellano's expression shifted from business-friendly to dangerously calculating. "What are you implying, Mr. Robertson?" "I'm asking directly. Margaret developed aggressive cancer right around the time your operation expanded to full capacity. Was her death related to your business activities?" Derek started to respond, but Castellano held up a hand. "Mr. Robertson, your wife's death was tragic but completely unrelated to our agricultural operation. Cancer is unfortunately common, especially in women of her age. Then why was she so terrified of me discovering your business? Why did she have anxiety attacks every time I suggested visiting the farm? What was she really afraid of?" "She was afraid you'd interfere with Derek and Samantha's financial security," Castellano said smoothly. "She knew you'd have moral objections to marijuana cultivation, that you might force them to shut down a profitable operation. Or she was afraid you'd kill me if I discovered your money laundering operation." Derek laughed, but it sounded forced. "Isaac, nobody killed Mom, and nobody's going to kill you as long as you're reasonable about business arrangements." "But if I'm not reasonable?" Castellano's smile disappeared completely. "Mr. Robertson, people who interfere with our operation tend to have accidents. Your wife understood that. She spent 12 years protecting you from making a mistake that would cost you your life." "So you did threaten her?" "We never had to threaten her. She was smart enough to understand the consequences of interference." That's when I realized Margaret's anxiety hadn't just been about protecting me from their criminal activities. She'd been living with the knowledge that these people would kill me if I discovered their operation, and the stress of keeping that secret for 12 years had probably contributed to her illness. I looked directly at Castellano. "And if I decide not to partner with you, then you become a security risk, and we eliminate security risks permanently." Derek nodded. "Isaac, you've seen too much. You know too much. You're either with us or you'll kill me like you killed Margaret." "We didn't kill—" Derek started, then stopped. But Castellano just smiled. "Mr. Robertson, your wife died of cancer. But accidents do happen to people who don't understand business realities. Are you going to be smart like Margaret? Or do we need to demonstrate our commitment to operational security?" I reached into my pocket like I was getting my phone to review their financial documents. Instead, I pressed the emergency signal that would bring FBI agents crashing through every door in 30 seconds. "Mr. Castellano, I think you just demonstrated everything I needed to understand about your business model." The FBI raid happened so fast that Derek barely had time to realize what was happening before he was face down on the farmhouse floor with federal agents reading him his rights. Castellano tried to run, made it about 50 yards before tactical agents tackled him in the driveway. Samantha just sat at her computer crying, while Agent Coleman bagged evidence from the sophisticated money laundering operation they'd built on my property. But the biggest revelation came 3 hours later, when federal forensics specialists found Margaret's hidden safe behind a false wall in the farmhouse basement. Agent Coleman called me over as her team opened the reinforced steel box. Inside were documents I'd never seen, recordings I'd never heard, and a sealed envelope addressed to me in Margaret's handwriting. "Mr. Robertson, your wife documented everything: financial records, photographs, recordings of conversations with Derek and his associates. She's been building a federal case for years." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Margaret's letter was dated 6 months before her death, written in the careful script she used when something was important. "Isaac, if you're reading this, then Derek and Samantha finally made the mistake I've been waiting for them to make. They think I'm just a frightened mother protecting her children. They don't realize I've been protecting you by gathering evidence to destroy them. I know you think I kept you away from the farm because I was afraid of what you'd do to them. The truth is more complicated. I was afraid of what they'd do to you if you discovered their operation too soon, before I had enough evidence to ensure they'd go to federal prison instead of just disappearing and setting up somewhere else. Derek threatened you in 2019. Not directly, but he made it clear that family problems could be solved permanently, if necessary. That's when I started documenting everything: their financial operations, their criminal associates, their threats against you. I needed enough evidence to ensure federal prosecution because local charges wouldn't protect you from the people Derek works for. The cancer moved faster than I expected. I hoped to have more time to build the case, to find a way to hand everything to federal authorities without putting you in danger. But if you're reading this, it means something happened to me before I could finish protecting you. Isaac, I didn't keep you away from the farm because I didn't trust you. I kept you away because I love you, and because the evidence I was gathering would get you killed if Derek discovered it too soon. The safe contains everything you need to reclaim your life and ensure justice for what they've stolen from us. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I was alive. I'm sorry you had to discover their theft and betrayal without understanding that I was fighting them every day, in the only way I could without endangering your life. You trained me well, soldier. I learned patience, tactical thinking, and how to gather actionable intelligence. I learned that sometimes protecting someone means keeping them in the dark until you can guarantee their safety. Use the evidence, destroy their operation, reclaim our farm. And Isaac, forgive me for making you think I didn't trust you. You were never the problem. You were always the solution I was working toward. I love you. I've been fighting for you every day since Derek first threatened our family. Now it's your turn to finish the fight. Margaret. I sat in the farmhouse kitchen, surrounded by federal agents processing evidence, reading my wife's letter 3 times before the full impact hit me. Margaret hadn't been protecting Derek and Samantha from me. She'd been protecting me from them while systematically building the case that would destroy them. The anxiety attacks, the secrecy, the desperate insistence that I stay away from the farm, it had all been operational security. Margaret had been conducting her own covert investigation, gathering evidence that would ensure federal prosecution instead of street justice. Agent Coleman handed me a thick folder. Mr. Robertson, your wife collected enough evidence to support RICO charges against 17 people, asset forfeiture on 14 properties, and federal prosecution for money laundering, drug trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. Murder? The recordings she made include Derek and Castellano discussing permanent solutions for people who interfered with their operation, including specific discussions about eliminating you if you discovered their activities. I looked through the farmhouse windows at my property, 340 acres of rolling hills that had been stolen from me for 12 years, used to launder $40 million in criminal proceeds, turned into the center of an operation that had threatened my life and destroyed Margaret's peace of mind. But Margaret had been fighting back the entire time. Every nervous conversation, every anxious night, every desperate attempt to keep me away had been part of a systematic campaign to gather enough evidence to ensure that Derek, Samantha, and their criminal associates would face federal justice. My wife hadn't been a victim of their intimidation. She'd been an undercover operative gathering intelligence to protect her family and destroy their criminal empire. And now it was my turn to finish what she'd started. Derek had made one final mistake. He'd assumed Margaret was weak, that her fear made her controllable. But Margaret had been a soldier's wife, and she'd learned that sometimes the most effective warfare happens in silence, without the enemy knowing they're under attack, until it's too late to escape. The farm was mine again. The criminals were under federal arrest, and Margaret's evidence would ensure they spent decades in federal prison, far from any opportunity to threaten other families. Justice was finally served, but more importantly, I finally understood that Margaret had been fighting for our family every single day in the most dangerous way possible. From the inside, gathering the intelligence that would ultimately save my life and reclaim our stolen future. 6 months later, I'm standing in the main room of the Riverside Veterans Support Center, located at 2247 Oak Street, in what used to be Derek and Samantha's money laundering headquarters. Federal asset forfeiture gave me ownership of their entire operation, the equipment, the buildings, even their bank accounts. $40 million in criminal proceeds became funding for something Margaret would have been proud of. Derek got 15 years federal prison. Samantha got 8 years plus full restitution. Castellano and his associates are facing RICO charges that will keep them locked up until they're too old to threaten anyone. The judge ruled that their criminal organization had been systematically stealing from a disabled veteran and his family for over a decade. Federal prosecutors described it as particularly heinous exploitation of military sacrifice. I kept the farm, 340 acres converted into a working ranch where veterans learn agricultural skills, financial planning, and legal advocacy. We teach soldiers how to protect themselves from family exploitation, how to recognize financial abuse, how to build evidence for federal prosecution when family members turn criminal. The marijuana greenhouses are now growing vegetables for local food banks. The money laundering computers are now teaching veterans digital literacy. The house where Derek threatened my life is now where combat veterans learn to reclaim their lives from people who try to steal their benefits, their property, their dignity. Margaret's investigation techniques became our core curriculum: how to document financial abuse, how to gather evidence of family exploitation, how to work with federal authorities when family becomes the enemy. We teach soldiers that family loyalty has limits, that blood doesn't excuse theft, that protecting yourself legally isn't betraying your values. Yesterday, I had coffee with Agent Coleman. She's now teaching our federal law enforcement workshop, helping veterans understand their legal rights and how to access federal protection when local authorities aren't sufficient. She told me Margaret's evidence has led to additional investigations across 3 states, shutting down criminal operations that were exploiting other military families. The farm generates about $200,000 annually now, legitimate agricultural income that funds veteran services instead of criminal enterprises. It's not $15 million, but it builds something instead of stealing something. Margaret would have understood the difference. I sleep well these days. No anxiety about hidden criminal operations, no fear of family betrayal, no wondering what secrets are being kept from me. The nightmares from Afghanistan are still there sometimes, but they're manageable. The nightmares about family theft and murder conspiracies are gone completely. Derek was wrong about one thing. This story doesn't end with federal agents and arrests and justice. It ends with building something better from the wreckage of family betrayal, with using stolen resources to protect other families from the same exploitation. If this story reminds you that family loyalty has limits, share it with a veteran you know, and drop a comment. Do you believe blood relatives deserve unlimited forgiveness? Or should family earn respect through their actions? Some battles are won by fighting. Others are won by building something better than what was destroyed. Margaret taught me the difference, and I'm spending the rest of my life teaching other veterans the same lesson. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about making sure the next family doesn't go through what we went through. That's Margaret's real legacy, and that's why her evidence saved more than just my life.